Senior Diversity Officer for the Leadership and Diversity group working out of Tucson. I have actually been involved in intergroup dialogue for the longest time, starting at almost 20 years ago at Arizona State University, going on to the University of Denver, doing dialogue there, University of South Dakota, and I just left University of Arizona about a year ago, also doing intergroup dialogue on there. Mostly with students, but over the years, we've gotten a chance to create, for example, community dialogues. Tempe, Arizona wanted to have neighborhood dialogues. So they asked us to do the training, and they got people from one neighborhood talking to another neighborhood. And some of those groups actually went above and beyond the beginning and the end of the program. After 2 years, they were actually still meeting at somebody's house on a periodic basis. And they've been very, very successful in terms of getting neighborhoods to understand issues that are going on between them and among them. So that's been very successful. And over the years, we've experimented with a bunch of different combinations and types of dialogue, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Let me tell you a story, because I like to tell stories, right? In order to set the work that we're going to do here into context. I don't know how many of you have ever seen the film The Color of Fear. It's about a 15-year-old film, and it is about these mixture of individuals, 2 African Americans, 2 whites, 2 Latinos, Asian, and I think 1 Native American males actually go up to a cabin in Northern California, and they meet there for a weekend, and they're supposed to be having dialogues about intergroup issues. And there's a point in time where David, one of the African Americans, is trying to explain to actually Victor, the African American, is trying to explain to David, one of the white males, about how he felt unsafe driving up past San Francisco, past Marin County to actually get to the site, and he felt unsafe with respect to possibly encountering the police. And David is actually having a difficult time understanding that idea. So he's making comments like, this is why I say that I think you people hold yourself back, because I think you're making it up. The police are here to protect us. And of course, David is getting very, very, very angry, and he starts raising his voice. In the meantime, there's another white individual that gets it, and I forget his name. And this other white individual starts also going after David, the other white guy, and criticizing him for making those kinds of comments. So it gets pretty intense. And the Latino individual actually, at one point in time, says, time out, hold on for a second. And talks to the second white guy, and he says something like, I hear it in your voice. You're starting to give up on him. Don't give up on him, because if you give up on him, you actually give up on the rest of us, right? And for me, I thought that was the most powerful message from that film. There's a lot of nuggets of information there, but that was the most powerful one, and I remember that. And I say that to you because part of the objective of intergroup dialogues is to not give up on anybody. And as facilitators, your work is leading this discussion to make sure that nobody is left behind. That no matter what they say, that you are going to create these spaces for the students or for the participants, the staff or the faculty, to actually work through their issues, but we don't give up on anybody. So that your role as facilitator is crucial, and this is why I'm here to actually do this training, so that you can get the skills in order to be those kinds of things. I will tell you that this is not easy work in many respects, because some of the things that people say in these dialogues actually impact your identity. So that if you are a member of the LGBTIQ community and one of the participants says something like, well, I read that gays are going to hell because the Bible says so. That's going to impact you as a facilitator if you're a member of the LGBTIQ community. So you want to actually sit back and, as much as possible, remove yourself from that during the dialogue in order for the person to not be attacked, but to actually take that comment, as horrible as it is, and allow the participants to dialogue about it in order to reach higher levels of not about indoctrination. It is not about convincing somebody that you're wrong or that you're right. But can we actually take a look at an issue, dissect it, and say, wow, it's much more complicated than these things actually. Yes.
Question about that. So, for those who were with, yesterday when we were talking, Naila, who's not here yet, was sort of asking the group what might be our next steps. I'm wondering, Jesus, I just quickly Googled it. It looks like we can watch, looks like it's on YouTube in different segments. Would you recommend that those of us who are trained today watch that as a group? Would that be helpful to our continued learning or parts of it, or I don't know, what's your thought on that?
Okay, wait, I'm a little bit lost. What is it?
The Color of Fear, the film.
Oh, The Color of Fear is about an hour and a half, or something like that. It's a long film.
Well, they have it in different segments on YouTube.
Oh, I see. It'll help. It won't hurt if you do that, but it's not a great example of a true dialogue.
Oh, it's not a great example?
It's not a great example.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was.
No, it's it's a good learning tool because you're gonna be able to see some of the things that I'm talking about. But today we're gonna simulate the dialogue so that you can get an idea of what it actually is supposed to be about. Because I fear that you're gonna get the idea that, okay, so in this dialogue, people can get up and start screaming in your face.
Oh.
Victor actually, he's very angry, rightfully so,
okay.
right? He's really.
Okay, so then maybe I'm gonna turn the question in a different way. So in the many weeks that Jesus and I were in touch, leading up to yesterday and today, and talking about the context of Alcobendas College, I did go on YouTube. There are a lot of resources on YouTube around intergroup dialogue. And what I learned, what I shared with Jesus, is there's some so-so programs around across the country, and there's some really good ones. If you could maybe recommend a couple film clips that we could watch of a model that you think is great, because what I'd like to invite us all to be thinking about is in the spaces that we inhabit on campus, where do you see these issues coming up? I, for example, can think of a committee meeting that I was in, it was mid-fall semester, where things really got quite heated between two committee members of quite different social identities. It was challenging for the chair to bring things down, and I think it was an opportunity that could have invited us into a dialogue space if we had a dialogue space, and that's really what we're trying to create. So if I could ask that of you to maybe, if you know of some certain film clips, the ones that I found, NYU has a really good program, but it was all student-based. And our discussion yesterday is that we're trying to develop a dialogue program for sure that could be done in the classroom with students and student facilitators, but could also involve our employees.
Right.
So, anyways.
Right. So as part of the resources, there's a manual.
Yep.
That has a lot of techniques and ideas about being a facilitator.
Okay.
The other thing that we require our facilitators when we do these dialogues is Kelly Maxwell's book, which is also part of the resources.
Okay.
And we ask facilitators to read the first 6 chapters. And that will give you a very good feel for what we're talking about, because it's designed for facilitators to understand some of the things that actually happen during these dialogues. And then I will actually, if you shoot me an email and ask me for film clips, I will actually look for those. You're absolutely right. I've seen some, it's been a while, that I can actually recommend to sort of elucidate, what's gonna happen. On the one hand, the training that I'm gonna do today might put you on edge, like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this work. It's so tough, and so on and so on. I don't want you to do that. I'm going to actually try to train you at that level, so that when you actually run the dialogues, you are prepared and you're not caught off guard. Right? But I will tell you that in 20 years of running this, we have never had a fight break out during these dialogues. The worst thing that I've seen is an Asian American student getting up, upset, and walking outside the room. That's the worst that I've actually seen. But we train the facilitators that if that does happen, what to do and how to prepare for that student actually walking out. Things do get heated, but if establish the ground rules at the beginning, and students understand the ground rules. And then there's a lot of icebreakers that happen before, and I'll talk more about that. That the student will bond on a personal basis, so that when you do hit that area, that time when conflict is going to emerge, that bond doesn't break. Students usually wear tags all the time, so that we're talking to each other on the basis of our names, as opposed to the white woman in the back, what you said last week, you know. I mean, that's very interpersonal versus Susan, you know, last week you mentioned something, now I'm talking to you on a personal basis, so I'm gonna talk to you with some level of respect, because I know you. So you spend a lot of time actually getting the bond before you even start looking at intergroup issues. You certainly don't start your dialogue group with, let's talk about affirmative action. Well, that's a hot topic, right? Or other topics that are really, really hot. You don't start with that, but you start with more level, topics that are actually much more low level. They're not as tense. Like I like to start with ethnic labels, for example, with the ethnic racial. So what I want to do today is I want to actually demonstrate some activities that you can actually do with the students to try to get a dialogue going. We're going to do a dialogue simulation, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the theory behind it, because it's important that you understand the theoretical frameworks behind the dialogues and the conditions that actually have to be present in order for change to take place. Some of what I did yesterday on schema theory, we're going to repeat that a little bit, but the difference is that I'm going to actually have you sit down and develop some schemas for different issues and for different communities, so that you can get used to this idea of planning to run a dialogue group, per week, so that the activities themselves are designed for you to not only learn yourself, but also designed for you to have as a quick tool at your disposal in case you show up and you ask that award-winning question that is just going to lead to like 2 hours of dialogue, which rarely happens. So if the students or the participants are having a difficult time talking, you do a quick exercise, and then you sit down in the group and you actually dialogue. Usually the dialogues are sitting, you have the participants sitting in a circle. Where it doesn't work is we schedule a room that has a conference table. That doesn't work at all. There's a barrier between us. So you want to schedule rooms where you can take the tables and sit in a circle. So that everybody's facing each other. That helps a lot with the dialogues. What else I'm going to do? Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the agenda, like the first week. The first meeting agenda and how that actually might go. And then Lisa, there's a lot of other information that I have that once you decide, yeah, we're going to go down this route, then I can send you like questions that we've collected over the years to give to the facilitator, like what question would I ask, right? And here's some examples of questions that you would ask regarding race in America, questions regarding gender identity, so that you have that at your disposal.
That'd be very helpful. So I was sort of thinking last night, since Naila had asked, and I love working with Naila, and she asked what are going to be our next steps, and I was kind of thinking about that. So I, for sure, would start by sending everyone who's trained the facilitator's guide and these other resources that Jesus is talking about. And then I'm kind of envisioning, bearing in mind where we are in the semester and everyone's schedule, we'll have to find a common time. If we were to kind of come together, I think some of these things, it's sort of like a wine, it needs to kind of sit and sort of, you need to kind of internalize. We're going to be talking about, well, we talked about a lot yesterday, a lot today too, but then really kind of, yeah, exactly, digest it, and then kind of come together as a group, because we're very fortunate. We sort of represent a nice cross-section of roles on campus, faculty, staff, and managers, and really kind of have a brainstorming session around what do we think the needs are in the classroom? What do we think the needs are in offices? Good morning.
I'm sorry.
No, welcome, Anayla. I was picking up on your question from yesterday about what would come next after our training. And what we're envisioning is a coming together. We'll probably come in this room. We'll hopefully find a time that's common, that will work for all and have a brainstorming session. What I would ask of each of us as facilitators would be to read the facilitator's guide that Jesus has sent us. It's not that long, I've read it. I also went online and checked on the price of the book that he was mentioning by Kelly Maxwell. I think, I'm gonna check with Jane Ishikawa's office. I think that we would be able to purchase a copy for each person who commits to being a facilitator. And then the other thing that we'll really need to think about is sort of, you know, what would this look like in terms of time? Like if we were to do a dialogue, the two models we looked at yesterday, it's not just sort of a one-time shot. You have to kind of think about realistically our schedule, what would work at El Camino College. And we all know that, you know, faculty will have a sense of how they may want to implement this with students in the classroom. Those of us who work in staff or supervisory roles may have a sense of how we want it to work. But and anyways, in answer to Naila's question, Yoshi, that's kind of what I'm envisioning. Okay. And if you all have ideas or thoughts or things that, you know, you'd like to contribute towards that next coming together, by all means, please feel free to email me. Okay? All right, let's continue.
Yes.
Could you tell us kind of the title of that book that you're talking about, the sixth chapter?
It's called,
It is called, I've got it right here.
oh, that's great.
It's called Facilitating Intergroup Dialogue. It's by Kelly Maxwell and someone named Byron Nagda and someone named Monica Thompson. It's available on Amazon, so I've emailed our buyer, Jeff Gass, to see if he can get us a little bit better price. And as I said, I think we can pay for this through the EEO funds that funded Jesus to be here. And that way we can each get a copy of it.
Do you have a suggestion? You might want to consider having the library get a copy? Or getting a copy for the
Absolutely.
library?
Absolutely. So
This
Crystal
is
and I
what I was
talked
going
about
to,
this.
also, I was gonna recommend is that both at the University of South Dakota and at the University of Arizona, the library had rights to the book, and that the students could actually check it out online. And that way because when we started this thing, we bought copies, and then the student would check it out, return them, but over the years we lose a lot of them. But that might be able to help with the cost of that if you.
Okay.
if
Is
you
it
have
on your
that.
hard copy?
So we will,
Printed electronic.
yeah, we would, for this group, for anyone who commits to being a facilitator, and we don't really know what that's gonna look like yet, we're gonna try to develop that. But for anyone who commits to that, they would be provided with a hard copy of the book, as well as the electronic link to the guide that Jesus sent, which, you know, when I talk Voices of Discovery guide, I want to read it for him, because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get through it, but it's very readable, it's very easy, so I would recommend that we start with that, and then, you know, kind of launch ourselves into this, and then, you know, we'd probably do some meetings, some readings, some reading. I'm venturing that if this were to really take off, it's probably gonna be the fall before we get it started, just realistically, we're at the end of basically the end of the spring semester. Some will be here during the summer, some will not be here during the summer. But the idea of these institutional efforts that we started to talk about yesterday is that they should be independent of any of us. And that's why, one of the reasons I enjoy working with Jesus, he commented to us yesterday, don't invite me back, right? It's sort of the shared accountability that we want to build a structure that would be started by this group, but could be sustained by any group. That's what institutionalization, to me, means, that it's not tied to one particular individual, rather it's tied to a college-wide effort. Marcia?
You know, and with that in mind, what you said earlier, your example of the committee meeting, you know, that the thoughts in terms of starting to, whether it's a little survey monkey, a 5-minute survey, just identifying based on what triggers our thinking today. We're getting trained in this particular way, but it's like when I go into committee meetings and there's like a flash mob, you know, flash situation that occurs, how can I bring these tools to bear, and with people who are running the committees, how can they set up those ground rules ahead of time? So it's starting to get institutionalized in that respect, but maybe a little survey to help us all just brainstorm while it's fresh in our mind.
that idea, so that would be one of the things that we would talk about in our follow-up meeting, is how are we gonna collect some data about the pulse of where things are on the campus. Each of us, I know, can speak to situations that have arisen either in the classroom or in the office or in other committee meetings, as I said. We're gonna be sort of the seeds of discovery in that way. But I think Marcia's right, that we do wanna maybe gather, it doesn't have to be said anything intense, a few questions on a survey from around the campus so that what we're building really is in tune with the lived reality of what's happening. We are a large campus, and I mentioned that, I said Diana's office is in facilities, that is the nature, is that we are not, Lucy and I didn't meet until yesterday, that happens, right? So, in any case, okay, let's continue.
I will say to you that, should you get this program off the ground, you are going to be pioneers in this work, simply because there aren't, particularly if you're working with staff and faculty, there aren't a lot of programs across the U.S. that are actually doing this work with staff and faculty. They're doing intergroup dialogue with staff and faculty. So you will actually be, at the forefront of practice and research. Keep that in mind. The other thing I was going to say to you is that being a good facilitator is being able to ask good questions and lots of questions to keep the dialogue going. And this is what I was talking about, making sure that I've sent you copies of the questions over the years. And then the second thing to keep in mind is understanding the difference between debate and dialogue, and even consensus, right? That many of us, come out of the tradition of debate. We understand what that is because we see debates in high school. We saw a debate, particularly students that are coming out of high school, where that was it. We debate, and the debate is about us going until you beat me or I beat you. Well, that's not dialogue. Dialogue is not, again, as I said, reaching consensus. It's not about us agreeing on the topic, but can we actually understand the concept in a much more complex way? So if the student or the participant walks away saying, I see it in a much more complex way, you've done your job. But this is something that actually should be discussed with the student, to say, we're not here to debate the issues, but we're here to talk to each other and actually see if we can actually understand this issue in a much more complex way and prepare the students. So the participants, whether they're staff or faculty or students, have to be given the tools at the beginning to be able to engage in dialogue. You can't just jump in and say, let's start talking about the topic. You're going to do some active listening exercises with them. You're going to do other kinds of exercises that actually allow them to get the tools and to do that. We'll demonstrate some of those. So I wanted to get going with some of those exercises first. It's early in the morning, and instead of me talking to you for a long time, I'd like for us to get the blood flowing and moving around. So we're going to do the first exercise. It's called a spectrogram. And this is something that you would actually use with the students or with the participants to get them to verbalize some of their opinions. And then you put them into the dialogue, and then you have a follow-up around it. The way that the spectrogram works is that you tell participants that on this end of the room are people that actually believe one thing, and on that end of the room are people who actually believe have other opinions, and then there are all kinds of opinions in between. So for example, if we were to talk about immigration, we would say that on this end, on the extreme end, are people who believe that we should build a wall, we should wall ourselves off, and let nobody into the room. That's an extreme position. The other extreme position on this side would be people who believe that have open borders, let anybody in. And then in between are all kinds of opinions. So I want everybody to actually get out and think about where